Well, great. Um, well, hey, real quick, maybe as a starting point, I had planned to run through this somewhat quickly, but making sure that as an objective, you not only understood the model but also had um, some comprehension enough so that if I actually sent this over, you could possibly even put it to use right away. And that's kind of the objective heading into the call today.
That'd
And,
be great.
Yeah.
and also, just wanted to check in how much time you actually had for this call, so I can adjust accordingly.
Well, we have it scheduled for an hour, but if it goes a little over, we should be okay, right?
Oh, yeah, that's great. That's all I wanted to know. This should, hope knock on wood, not need more than an hour at all. So
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
wonderful. Okay, well, I'm going to walk you through how this works and also demonstrate two divisions: one, the human resources data set, and also one of the transportation divisions, just so you can see how I've taken your information that you've sent over and plugged it into the model, and you can kind of see how it flows through to a summary at the end.
Okay.
The basic logic of the spreadsheet is that there are three tabs. You see them labeled down below, and they work in sequence with one another. So there's a first step, a second step, and a third step. And when you complete them all, this final tab with a summary of the inventory and costs simply pulls all the information together so that we can see. You can see in this case, kind of beginning with the end in mind. Here are programs, the fund that they might belong to, if we have that data, the department, the division, the program number that corresponds to the program number that was assigned to the program in priority-based budgeting, and then all of the data, which will include the total program costs, FTE, if we have program revenue, costs associated with personnel, so the personnel costs, the remaining operating costs, costs associated with vacancies, depending on how we designate the vacancies, costs associated with the retirement eligible personnel, costs associated with personnel nearing retirement, and then actual vacant FTE numbers, retirement eligible FTE numbers, and the FTE nearing retirement totals. And I'll show you how all this comes together. So basically, the idea being, if we can, if you all in your work with the departments, us in our coaching, as they go through this effort to take a look at their inventories and actually go through this consistent methodology to cost programs and assign those key characteristics to FTE, we'll have all the data that we need to feed the model with the workforce analysis information. So stop me at any time as we go through this. But I'm going to start back at the beginning then with step one, loading the personnel costs. And this flows very similarly to how you guys have been sending over your information, where we have position titles, and I've simply just entered those in here in this HR example, from HR director to HR supervisor all the way down. And you see, once we run out of positions, the template is set up that you can continue to add a lot of positions depending on how big the department or division is. But in this case, we entered down to about row 25, and that was the end of this data set. We have one FTE in each of these positions. The way that you had sent information over so far, each of these positions corresponded to just one actual FTE. But this is a field that you could change. And just to give you an example, say you had a number of HR analysts, like you showed down here, and you wanted to just consider them as a common job class without actually separating them all. You could just label HR analyst as the position title, and then enter in 2, 3, 4, or however many you want to in this field, and it will collect all that information as the summary of all those FTE serving that same position.
But I have a feeling that once we get to police and fire, that will come into play a lot more, because I don't know that they put in all 400 of their officers on separate lines. That department yet.
That's exactly why we did it. We wanted to give you that flexibility that you're not locked into simply entering in all 400 people. You could consider it as one big job class, just so long as we allocate the cost correctly.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so we'll go back to, but I think you guys you understand exactly why we did it that way. Over here, this is one field where we've designated the ability to tag these positions with retirement eligible, nearing retirement with an N, retirement eligible was with an E, or vacant if the position is currently vacant with a V. And that came from the information that you guys provided as well. We've just included it in one column, and then you simply go through and you tag it with an N, V, or an E. And again, all this information flows through to the back. We can create additional columns with ease. That's what's another nice part about the tool. If you actually somewhere along the line in the process have the desire to have additional information about employees to tag them with, besides simply retirement eligible, nearing retirement, or vacant, we have the ability to do that. Right now, we've just left it with E, N, or V, but we can add additional designations as we go. And then finally, you had job class information, which I've just pulled that over from the data as well. So, go ahead.
Police, and we have our 400 people. A subset of them probably is vacant or nearing retirement, so we might have, say, 350 officers, 20 officers in for nearing retirement, 3 vacant or whatever, and we just separate out the positions like that?
Yep.
The group?
Yeah, so you're exactly right. So if you had all 400 of them and and 350 of them are currently employed, not retirement eligible, you don't want to pick out any of them individually, then leave those all in the group and just pull out the ones who fall into one of the categories.
Okay, that's easy enough.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So this is all data that you actually input, all that I'm selecting right here. There are no formulas here. It's just entering this into the model. There are a lot of summary points throughout the tool, as you'll see. Right here we have total number of FTE, which is grabbing this total. And these become important as we go to the end when I show you the summary, because we're coming at these totals from 2 different angles, so we can actually check that all the information has been assembled correctly. And we can go back, it'll tell us at the end, and I'll show you just as an example, right here in program cost, we have an alert here in yellow that's going to remind us at the end, hey, we haven't added everything up yet. There's something that we need to check. And so as we go through this, you'll see little summaries, and they all have some use, which we'll get to in the end. Okay, so the point of this first step 1 is to take all of these positions and associate all personnel-related costs with the actual people. And so scrolling across the top here, you have the ability to enter in all personnel-related expenses. In the information that you've sent over, and I'll show you just as an example, we have, so here are those same positions. This is where I got the information from. And you have total annual city cost, and the amount to allocate is the same. On the personnel side, we have the other line items down here, which I'll get to in the third step, actually. But you've already assembled what looks like fully loaded personnel costs for each of these positions. I'm going to show you an example real quick of the exact same tab in a worksheet for the city of Wheat Ridge where they actually did not have the fully loaded personnel costs assembled for each position, but they had all of the individual benefits laid out, and they could take these line items, all the benefits and the salaries and wages, and enter each of these bits of information individually and the costs coming from their line item budget and associate these with the FTE to generate that total fully loaded costs. And I'm only pointing that out to you because in the examples that you've given us so far, it looks like you've totaled the fully loaded personnel costs. But if it actually makes it easier to enter that into the model so you can see all of the steps taking place, the model will help you take each of those personnel costs and associate it with with each of these positions.
Okay.
Does that make sense so far?
And that's why that first column's labeled salaries and wages versus wages and benefits or something? Because of the fact that we're using it kind of differently than Wheat Ridge?
Right. I mean, I could have called this, and this is up for you guys to enter in whatever label makes most sense, but I could call this total personnel costs, in parentheses, salaries and benefits.
Beautiful.
Just so you know, it's everything in this case instead of all of the individual benefits that you provide where we're associating them all with the FTE. But do you see, you might have a division where you don't have those costs summarized, or you might find out that it's easier to lay them out one by one and let the model summarize them rather than you guys have to do that work on your end.
Okay.
I think one of the questions that we were trying to that you guys left us with was, is it useful for you to continue to feed us data that comes in this format versus as we developed this template, is there another way that's going to be easier for you to provide us the data? All I'm trying to accomplish in this part of the presentation is to say, I don't know what work went into you guys calculating this fully loaded cost for personnel. And if it's easier for you, you can actually lay out those costs in the model.
We're just taking it off something we already have that already adds up all the individual costs to the total. So it's just data input. We weren't doing any calculations.
Wonderful.
So then we have to do it anyway, so yeah.
That's great. So then as we proceed with the rest of the organization, this will just be one single column where we have those total costs, and then we just associate them with the position or groups of people that they belong to. Okay. So are you guys good to move on to the next step?
Yeah.
Okay. I just heard some talking. I wasn't sure if you had a question. Okay. So at this point, each of these positions now owns a total cost. And we move to step 2, and you see that each of these same positions now have now moved from where you had entered them in the load personnel cost tab, and now they exist from left to right in this row. And we're going to associate each of these positions with the programs that they serve.
Okay, the programs are down there in people. Okay.
So we have each of the positions, and it just reads, you don't have to enter this information back into the model at all. This actually is pulling directly from how you entered them in step 1. And so you see each of the positions as you've titled them, the position number, the number of FTE, and then this little row 7 is also carrying whether or not they had a vacancy or a retirement eligible designation. It's just flowing through in the model. So you don't have to enter anything up here. In step 2, what you have to enter are the programs that you're going to assign these FTE to on a percentage basis. So now we have the programs, and I just, again, will show you, oh, this is from transportation development. I could pull it up, but in the information that you had sent over, we saw the programs that you had labeled. So in this case, here's current and long-range planning, site development plan review and inspection, and civil engineering. In that particular, and I'll show you where it is here. Here is the planning division's example model. Again, in step 2, we've just entered that information here. Now, one of the key components to tying all of this effort in the costing template and the workforce analysis to your priority-based budgeting work is we're going to want to make sure that these programs that we're assigning the staff to are actually the programs that you used in the scoring process and priority-based budgeting. And the way that we link the two is by that program number. On the HR side, we were able to find, I think you actually gave them to us, the program numbers that corresponded to these actual programs. In the transportation worksheet that you sent over, we haven't gone through to actually find these programs and find their program numbers, but that's going to be what we want to do as we move forward to populate these, is find out, okay, current long-range planning, what was the program number in priority-based budgeting, so that we can line these programs up. We're not going to assign costs to programs that weren't scored.
Yeah, they should all match up to something, so yeah.
Exactly.
Good work, yep.
So on the HR side, I think, like I said, you had provided us all this information. So we have a column where you can enter in the program number. Here are all those programs by name. If there was a specific division, we could enter that here. The accounting fund, this is going to be important where, say, labor management negotiations, this program, what if part of it was funded by the general fund and part of it was funded by some other accounting fund? We'd want to just be able to keep track of that. Some of the programs might actually be split across funds, and that's how you designate that. You'd actually have the same program, and then here's labor management negotiations from the general fund, and the next program would be the same labor management negotiations from whatever other fund is supporting it. But the idea for this part of the worksheet is pretty simple. Once you enter in the programs and all of these positions have pulled through, you go through the exercise of just entering the percentage of time that each employee spends supporting the program. And we pulled this information from what you'd sent over. So here's the HR director, 35% of their time supporting administration, 35% of the time supporting labor management negotiations, 30% to employee relations and leave management, and that equals 100%. Up here at the top, it's just doing a simple calculation where it's looking to see, have you allocated that FTE 100%, or are we missing anything? Have you over-allocated the FTE or under-allocated the FTE? And in the information you sent over, you had just the percentages added up perfectly as we needed them. As we've gone through this exercise with other organizations, and this is just to be mindful of, if the departments take a role in allocating their staff time to the programs, sometimes the tendency is they say, well, this position, I'm actually overworked. I work the equivalent of 2 jobs, and so I want to allocate 200% of my time to the programs I serve. And that's not how the worksheet works. You only have 100% of your time to allocate. Otherwise, we'd allocate twice all of your fully loaded personnel costs to that program. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
All right.
We can't put in real time.
Exactly. You got to put in real time. Even if you have some slackers, they can't be less than 100% if you're paying them. You have 100% of their time to allocate.
Period. Yep. Okay.
All right. Perfect. This is also where you have the ability. You could enter, and we're working through this right now with Douglas County, Nevada, just to plant the seed. They have a lot of volunteer support for programs, and they wanted to capture that as well. And so what we did back in step 1, as they were entering positions, we actually entered in or working with them to associate volunteer positions who aren't paid. There's no total personnel costs, salaries, and benefits to actually load into the model, so it's 0. But then those volunteers show up over here, and they can associate their time with the programs, and we can at least capture that these are resources that are going towards the program. I know that's not something that we had talked about before, but it's something that we've just been discussing with them and wanted to bring it to light, just in case you are thinking about that at all.
So do you put negative personnel costs to show your savings for them, or you leave it blank and it just allocates zero cost to the program but shows the FTE?
And that's a great question. So what we're conceptualizing is trying to understand what would the equivalent be if we were actually paying this person. If they're a staff member at the library and they're volunteering certain hours, approximately what kind of position is this? Is this a $30,000 a year page? Are they actually working a full-time job, or is it more of like a half-time position? So let's try and at least estimate what kind of position this would be if we were paying for it. And then at the end of the model, instead of doing a negative where it pulls it out, where you guys have costs associated with personnel, costs associated with vacancies, retirement eligible, they have equivalent costs of a volunteer position so that they can track all along the way, hey, it's as if we are staffing this program at $100,000, but we're actually only paying $50,000 or however it's going to work out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So remember in the beginning when I said that we can add additional designations and capture this information. This is, while you guys are the cutting edge, we want to keep bringing new possibilities to you because we can continue to add new information as we go along. Okay, so as a result of going through this exercise, and you can look across the top and do a quick check and see, all right, looks like for all the positions that have been pulled through from step one, ending here, we've allocated 100% of everybody's time, so that's great. Now we can move on to the third step, which is associating the rest of the costs that you'd included to the actual program. So the remaining operating costs, so I'll show you here's from the transportation planning division. When we scrolled down, we could see here were the additional line items that you had captured, that you'd gone through and allocated to the programs as well. And so we pulled that information through to the worksheet. And here's how this works. We noticed that you had included percentages to allocate these costs. So in this case, here's professional or line item, the code 5200 for professional and contracts. And then you put 2% of that cost with current and long range planning. You allocated 0% of that cost to site development plan review, and then 98% of that cost to civil engineering. So clearly you're recognizing that there's some methodology there that you've gone through to say that this line item needs to be broken out so that the vast majority of it actually belongs to civil engineering, but some portion of it belongs to current and long-range planning. We've designed something similar where we're taking each of these line items, and as you enter these total costs up here in the spreadsheet, you have some allocation methodologies to choose from. So you can take this commuter insurance or professional contracts and services right here, this total amount of money, and divide it evenly by the FTE. In certain cases, that might be the best way to do it. If you have a supply line item or it's paper in a certain office, you can divide evenly by FTE. And what it does is it takes this total costs, and because you've already identified in total how many FTE support each program in step 2, it just takes that cost and actually performs the calculation down below, associating it with the programs, having divided it all by FTE. On the other hand, as we're demonstrating in this commuter insurance, you can allocate the dollars directly to a program if you know specifically how those costs should be allocated. So just like in the example we were looking at here in the planning division, it looks like for these professional services or wherever this contract is, you believe that the vast majority of that belongs to civil engineering, it doesn't make sense to allocate that on a per FTE basis. That's some sort of contract that belongs specifically to that program. How you do it in the model is you can say allocate dollars directly to program and then just actually input that information. So this toggles back and forth, where divide evenly by FTE is one of the choices. And again, if you choose that, you just see how the costs flow through. If you choose allocate dollars directly to program, it zeroes it out, and then you just actually go through and manually type it in where you think those dollars should be allocated. And then we left one that just said, all right, the top methodologies that are most reasonable, dividing it evenly by FTE, or if you have specific information, just plugging in the information. If neither of those are what you choose, you can also just choose we're not sure, and it leaves them blank. And the benefit of doing that, if this is an exercise that the departments are participating in, is it's a complex line item that we are interested in finding out. There are items that you're budgeting for that we're not exactly sure how they line up to programs, and that's worth the discussion. So that's why we created that unsure choice. So if you remember, back here in the summary, we had one of these buttons or alerts that said we need to check because these costs just aren't adding up. It's because here in step 3, as we're associating these other costs, I had left this to allocate dollars directly to programs, and this $24,000 had actually not been associated yet with anything. And you also know that because up here there's $24,000 left to allocate. And so the end of the model, as we're pulling the summary, and up here in this top row, showing us that there's $24,000 left to allocate, these are 2 warnings that make sure that we know that our work isn't done yet. But finally, here we are in the summary of inventory and costs, and this is pulling. We have the department if we've entered it in. These are still reading blank. It just still says enter accounting fund name here because we would want to go back and make sure that in the sheets that you'd sent over or as you move forward with it, I could have assumed that it was general fund, but I just didn't know. It wasn't 100% clear, or I missed it. The appropriate division, the program name flows through, and the program number. And here we are with program costs. Oh, and I'll just show you. If we had chosen divide evenly by FTE, just for the sake of the exercise, now we come back here. Aha, it ties out. Everything is added up correctly. The costs for the programs, as they're added up in one method, tie out to the total costs that we've entered into the model. And so now we have some assurance that this is legit. We have all the costs accounted for. Total number of FTE, that comes from step 2 as we allocated the FTE. Program revenue, that's one where right now we've just left it here in this final summary that you can just go through and enter in program revenue if we have that data. And you remember how that is taken into consideration in the priority-based budgeting model, the distinction between general government resources and program revenues being those specific fees or charges that help pay, they're intended to pay specifically for a program, so that if that program were to ever go away, you actually would not collect those revenues any longer. Those program-specific revenues would go away. So if we have those for the programs that you offer, here's where we would actually enter it in. We didn't create a step 4 to simply enter in program revenue. It's just a one-shot here. If we have the information, we just enter it in here at the end.
Do you have to enter it negative or positive?
Enter it positive.
Okay.
That's a good question. Yeah, it's for program revenue. We just keep track of program revenue as a positive number. Yeah, John's giving the accountant a nod of approval, saying it doesn't need to be in debit or credit style. And then we have it broken out, summarizing all of these various categories that become important to the model. Costs associated with personnel. So that's drawing from step 1, the actual personnel, the fully loaded personnel costs that we developed, but it's on a program basis. So here it's associated with the actual way that you distributed those specific employees to each program. The other operating costs being all of the remaining costs that you accumulated in step 3, the costs associated with vacancies. So if we had designated a vacancy, taking that those personnel costs as well and flowing them through the model, retirement eligible personnel, costs associated with personnel nearing retirement as well. And that all comes back through to that's the information that we need to put it back into the model at the end, as we were showing you guys in the last time that we all met, how it works in the resource allocation model. So does this, that's the step-by-step. So I might take a break here and just kind of see if you guys want to revisit any of the steps, or if it seems to make perfect sense and you want to kind of get your own version of it and start playing with it.
So do you want, I understand exactly what you're doing with what I've sent you so far.
Uh-huh.
So do you want me to continue to do what I've been doing to collect the data, or do you want me to put it directly into a template like this and then send it to you?
Great question. So let's talk about this for a second. As we were developing this phase 2 work, one of the things that we were discussing was how do we bring the departments into this, and we were describing how we would take the beta version of the resource alignment diagnostic tool. We'd build this program costing template. We wanted to see, is this an exercise that you're going to work with the departments to the extent that they have changes they want to make in their inventory? Are the departments on your end going to be invited into this process at all about coming up with some of their own program costs with some coaching? Or are we going to move ahead working together with you guys? You feed us data, we populate the model, we can send it back to you, or you can populate the model, and then the departments are invited at the point of rescoring programs. It's kind of open-ended question.
Good question.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know that we've totally decided how we want to go forward with that either.
Because at this point, I'm putting in last year's cost. So maybe what we do is we populate with last year's, send it out to the department so they can update with this year, because they know how to allocate their operating and maintenance lines. We don't know how to operate those.
You're putting in 12-13 costs.
Right, what they did for 12-13.
Right.
Because that's what I did with their personnel too. Oh, is that even 11-12?
We're going to have to
That would have
do
been 11,
final
12.
negotiated 12-13.
Yeah, we're going to have to update everything 12-13, but
and
yeah.
there might be some instances too that people shifted around and aren't in the same cost center anymore.
Well, and Courtney will know all that. So we'll have that, but we will need help we can give them the list of employees, but they're going to have to tell us what programs these people are assigned to.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Do they do it in the spreadsheet in the old fashion, or have them actually do it in here?
This makes a lot of sense, I think, to them, because they can see right away what they're inputting and how to
So you could put in their initial numbers and total costs, all their positions.
And their position stuff, so then they wouldn't have to do that.
And we can do,
And then
they would have to allocate it to the program.
That makes.
So how many people can be in this at once?
Well, right now this is just an Excel spreadsheet. So yeah. I mean, you will have some handoffs and some version control. The approach that you're describing makes a lot of sense, to the extent that you guys with us or on your own populate the model all the way until they're actually dividing up or associating their staff with the programs by a percentage basis. This is a really easy task I say easy to the extent that they can sit down and think it through. How much do I spend supporting this program and that program? But I meant easy from the standpoint of there isn't much to get wrong here. They just enter in the percentages. And we've worked with a couple organizations now, while they didn't have all the tags to the employees like you guys are doing, they actually went through this allocation process, and they seem to get it pretty easily.
Yeah, because we've done, as you've seen, essentially the same thing with our spreadsheets. So
Right.
they're not exactly standard, so this would help standardize that too. So
And that's true. That's another thing that we've heard is, everybody goes through this process the same way. They're already familiar with it from how it sounds like you've done it in the past. So it's just a matter of, can they revisit the way that they're supporting each program on a percentage basis.
All right.
but then once we have a totally compiled, whichever way we do it, however we have a totally compiled spreadsheet of the whole city, that would go off to you?
Oh yeah. So as these are completed, we're going to come back here and take the entire summary for every department or division or however it's easiest that you've assembled all of these worksheets, come up with the entire citywide. What we'll find perhaps is that this program 9035 had some allocation to it from this department and this division, but there's going to be a handful of programs probably that touch multiple departments. And so we're going to look to see, does program 9035 actually show up a couple of different places? And then we'll just add up the total cost, the total FTE, total costs associated with vacancies, the vacancies that exist in both departments. Do you see how that would work?
Yeah.
Where do they get that total, or the program number?
It must be in last.
That's in the master list of all the
From last
programs from
Okay.
last year. Yeah.
I was just asking about the program number, Chris.
Oh, yeah. And so that is going to be the key. One way or another, we can send you, I mean, you'll have it in the latest version of the tool. Let's see if I can pull it up real fast.
So this template, Chris, if we wanted to say for management services, have one template for the whole department, there'd be enough rows in our step one load personnel costs to do that, correct? Or how many, I want to ask how many rows we're limited to in step one.
You're totally right. I think right now, but let me scroll down to the bottom here. Right now I've set it up for 250 positions, but we can, with total ease, I'll just drag the formulas down and it will continue to flow through. What's the largest amount of, I mean, should I set it up for 1,000?
No.
Because a lot of the departments that have a large number of people have a great number of people in the same position titles, like police. Management services has less than 100 FTEs. There might be some that are partial FTEs, but 200 would certainly give us enough rows, even if an FTE is broken out.
Okay.
For management services department.
Split funding or whatever.
Right.
They have to be on there twice. Yeah.
The only department I think that we might run into some difficulty, I don't know how big MUD is. And they have some people that have the same title too, though.
Yeah, I think it's probably okay the way it is.
Yeah, with the 250.
Yeah.
Well, tell you what, as we get into this, and you come across an example where you need more rows, that's a very, very quick change.
Police has 483, but 226 are all under officers.
Okay.
And then 233 for fire, which
And
we can roll up.
Throughout community services and MUD.
Community services is 190.
Okay.
And MUD,
They have some people that have the same job description.
no, MUD doesn't exist. No, 168. We're good.
Okay.
We only have 70.
Great.
The whole department would go on.
Right. So we
Tab
have
one all the way down.
One spreadsheet for management services, one spreadsheet for community services, one spreadsheet. And so then when they're loading there, then they'd be able to see on their summary of inventory for their whole department.
Mm-hmm.
And that might be meaningful for them to be able to break things out and cross-check their totals and stuff instead of having it oh, I have 5 different divisions, so I'm going to break each one down into a different template, and then something might get double counted or eliminated.
But I'll tell you guys, and I'm sure John's smiling over there. We just went through this with the city of Wheat Ridge. It's a suburb of Denver here in Colorado. And again, they just use the very basic version of this tool to associate staff with the programs and these other line items. Their divisions were uncomfortable seeing their line item budgets at a department level. They only were familiar with them at a division level, or and sometimes even at a more discrete level. So they had so many multiple versions of this costing template out there. It still works. I mean, you just have several versions of the program, but it was cumbersome on their end, just to have so many different versions of it going around. To the extent that you can do it at a department level is going to be great.
All right.
Yeah, that should help.
So
on the rows, I assume you can like insert a row if you get partway down the list and forgot to split a position or something, and you need to go back up to it.
Yeah, that there would be no problem there. I hesitated just for a second. I'm trying to think of where are places where you can break this. Inserting a row won't cause a problem.
Even though in step 2 it's transposing those rows to columns?
This, if you...
Or is it best to just resort step 1 so your positions are together if you forget to split one apart?
Yeah, that might be best. I was thinking about actually just trying one out right here and seeing what would happen.
Because if you just resort it, your relationships in step 2 are just going to a specific column regardless of what you input in the first one. I think it would be better to resort it than to try to insert something,
Or copy and then copy insert. Or copy down so that you can type on a blank line.
Let's try it. See.
I'm going to do it real quick just for our curiosity. So it sticks out. This will be missing FTE. All right. So this should be the third position when we come over here.
One of those group ones.
Right.
They put them all.
Hey, look at that.
Look
at that. It did it.
That's good.
That's pretty sharp.
That's good.
Good programming, yeah.
Yeah, you did a good job.
Thank you. I'm happy with it too.
When you go up to all the way to the right in here, does it have as many? Is your last column sucking from your last row still? Or did it drop?
Or do you lose one, you mean?
Right.
Oh.
So look at your cell references in your ID column. And what row is it pulling from on the spreadsheet before? You're in the total column. Yeah. So if you go there, it's taking it.
This is a cool formula. It's
You're transposing down to 252. So if we go back to step 1, if we go down to 252, is that still the last row?
You're exact, and I know it was 251. We were just looking at it, but I'll
Pretty cool.
check this out. Here now is 252.
Very good.
Things we get impressed with, I tell you.
All right, this is fun. It's fun that you guys know exactly what's going on, and you all appreciate it. This is great. All right, we're actually, this is slated to be one of the tools that enters into the web-based model as well. But at least for now, we've tried to design some ways not to break it too easily.
Good plan.
Okay, so I mean, I guess kind of returning to our overall game plan just for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Just a few weeks ago, one of the ideas was that in early August or sometime in August, there was going to be, and it's not that we need to stick to this at all. You guys actually have a nice timeline that offers some flexibility. But at least one of the thoughts was we really wanted to bring departments back into the process, revisit a little bit how everything took place, but then kind of really have a kickoff of some sort to let them know, here's how the workforce data is going to come together. And as we were just talking about, are they going to have a role in that or not? Certainly we wanted them to have the opportunity to revise their inventories if there were changes they wanted to make. John and I will have, if we still went down this path with a kickoff like this, John and I would have we'd be sending the message that we don't necessarily encourage a lot of rolling up of programs. To the extent that you had broken them out in the first place in the first year, unless you find a program that was just really insignificant and it didn't make any sense to keep track of its costs, it was such a small program, go ahead and leave it, even if it's small. Because the rolling up of programs, the danger is you have many different programs in one. It's tougher to score. The department feels like maybe it's a little less work on their end, but really you lose value in the process. You have too many programs rolled up into one. The departments don't get that level of discretion, and you don't save that much time in work. So that was part of the message we wanted to get across to them. If we still went down this path, we would also give them information about whether they're going to be involved in going through assigning percentages to programs and give them a bit of an introduction to this tool and some timing, and then ultimately lay out, hey, here's how the process is going to work in this phase 2 to actually have a chance to rescore programs and then assemble somewhat of a revised peer review ahead of pulling together all the elements of a final model, again, this time well ahead of your budget development process. So our question for you guys is just, we want to make sure that whatever we do following this meeting, and maybe you need more time to just kind of put your heads together, is just that we're on track for how we want to kick this off with the departments, what their role is going to be in developing the costs and the workforce information. And then if we do pull together this kind of kickoff workshop, just making sure that we set up the timing with you guys and start preparing for it.
Do a webinar or a go-to-meeting kind of presentation, you mean?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're not quite there yet in our planning process, so I think we're thinking, early September on that now.
Okay. Yeah, sorry for all these emails,
August has kind of gotten away from us, unfortunately.
Oh, no problem. Totally understand. And again, from our perspective, we just want to let you know, we don't need to put the pressure on to let you guys know that, hey, you're losing time, you're going to miss the deadline. Right now, we had everything geared up so that by a November timeframe, we'd actually have all the information together with no problem. And again, that would serve you guys as you actually have the tool to be able to use in your budget development heading into next year. If this slips a little bit and we're into December, we just want to make sure that we're communicating that to you so you don't feel like the project timeline's moving, slipping away.
Okay.
Yeah, sounds fair.
All right. Well, is the next step then, at least for the immediate, John took a look at thanks a ton for sending over the revised agreement. John made some comments. I have to add in the revised fee schedule, and we can get that back to you next week. And then either today or certainly early next week as well, we can feed you the templates, the actual model, so you can play around with it. And then we should probably just come back together at some point here to talk about how you think it's going to work out best to roll this out.
Okay.
You're talking about this workforce analysis model.
Yep.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, that would be great. I think we need a few days or a week or so at least to just Julie and I to try to play with it. I think understand it totally. But
Okay. Well, hey, why don't we do this? I'm just looking at a calendar right now. Would this work out for you guys? If next week, early next week, we're sending you the model to play with, and then we're getting you all of the feedback on the agreement. You guys have next week to take a look at things, play with the model, kind of do some strategizing, and then we aim for sometime during the last week of August. Do you want to tentatively set a time to hopefully come back together? Maybe the I'm just looking at this 28th or so.
Would that be when you want all of the information for step 1 populated?
I'm not. That would be amazing if you had all that done by then. Oh yeah, I don't think it's necessary. I was saying.
Plan a little bit more.
Yeah, I was making the suggestion more for if we had a chance to catch up with each other during the last week of August, just to say, okay, you've had a chance to look at the model. If you have any questions, we've answered them hopefully along the way over the next 2 weeks. And we have kind of a clear game plan now of how we roll out the model to the organization.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll have a plan in place before we roll into September.
Perfect. That's great. That sounds great.
All right.
Well, I'll send you. Yeah, look at your calendars for that week of the 27th through 31st, and maybe even aim towards the end of it just to give ourselves more time, and we can just go from there.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, very cool. Well, we're happy because it's been great to work on this tool, and it's going to be something as we continue to talk about just that changes the whole perspective on the resource alignment diagnostic, as we're able to incorporate this data. And so that every time we get into this a little bit further or another division, this is fantastic.
Yeah, you've done a wonderful job building this.
Oh, thank you. Thanks.
For example that you have in front of us right now, this is just the planning division of transportation development, and we sent the whole department. So we can add all the rest of that and just change some of the titles on the top.
That's right.
The whole department. You have department division. Or just the top populate what's beginning of your department and division.
Sorry, I missed that last part.
On your row A2 here, does that automatically populate from what you put in from columns B and C? So if you have multiple divisions, it's going to try to list all those divisions out, or does it just show the department?
Oh, I see. The divisions, this information, let's see here. You can easily override it. So that's a good question.
Well, I think in the department, it's typed in transportation development planning division instead of just transportation development. That's probably why I took it up to the top.
Yeah, as you enter in the programs, you can actually enter in whatever division you want, and that is what pulls through to this final sheet. So the summary is driven by, the summary contains programs and the department where the program comes from and the division, to the extent that you had identified those the first time you identify programs, which takes place here in step 2. So if you entered current long-range planning division, and the next one was site development, plan review, engineering division, that's okay. You can enter those here, and I'll just show you an example. What if that was division E? We come back here, and that's coming through. And that's here as well. So this was just to kind of keep track of the department or division who's completing the worksheet. and you can enter that in. Actually, the first time here is in step 1, and that flows through here. It comes all the way to the end. Does that help? Okay, sorry. Didn't know if that helped to answer the question. All right, guys. Well, thanks for taking the time, and I think we have a good game plan. I'll send this. John and I will get together and send the agreement back over, and we'll also work with you, probably Greg, to look at the calendar for about 2 weeks from now.
Chris, can we just the same time on Friday, August 31st?
Yeah, let's just go for that.
Okay. Lock and load, 1:30 to 2:30.
All right. And if anything comes up on your end, just let us know. This is a nice and flexible time.
Okay.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again, guys.
Thank you very much. Yep.
Have a great weekend.
Thanks, you too.
Bye.
Bye.